Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2004 horror film, The Birthday. And before I get around to sharing my thoughts on this one, I want to give yet again a special shout out to Brock for requesting this review. If there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below, and I will try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, The Birthday is a unique, interesting misfire of a film. In a lot of ways, it's a genuine misfit. It doesn't really fit in with the rest of the crowd, and in some ways, that's a positive. It helps it actually become somewhat unique when it comes to your typical independent horror film. But on the other hand, it's also something that makes it something that you don't really want to be around for that long or really again, because there's just so many things about it that just set off red flags. The film is directed by a guy named Eugenio Mira, and it deals with this guy named Norman, who's a guy who's in love with his girlfriend and goes to her father's birthday party at a hotel. And it's a very awkward party, and it seems like there's something weird going on. And then you find out that there is some kind of secret cult that is tied into everything, and there's a potential apocalypse that's involved, and the impending rise of a old god in the vein of Cthulhu. So it's a horror film, but it doesn't really get to the horror until like 40 something minutes into the movie, which I think is an issue, and I will detail further why I feel that way when I get to talking about the script in more detail. But the direction by Eugenio Mira, I thought was actually pretty marvelous. I thought he did a magnificent job considering the low budget that he had to work with, considering all the limitations. There were a lot of shots in this film that look fantastic, that really make the film look like it cost more than it did, made it have this higher production value quality to it. There are certain scenes in this that are very creative in terms of the angles that he used, or the different zooms or pans, or movement of the camera. I think he worked well with lighting and other things like sound and uh, other more unorthodox forms of visual directing. I really do feel that he handled all of that really well. It's a very ambitious film at times, and I think Eugenio Mira, he really knocked it out of the park. I mean, when it comes to the most consistently good thing about this movie, other than the masterful production design and art direction, I would definitely say it's the direction by Eugenio Mira. I thought it fit the tone of the film rather well. It had this off kilter, surreal, weird vibe to it, just like the overall film. And it was a very unique looking film, and it fit for a rather unique, oddball movie. The script, though, by Mikel Alvarino and Eugenio Mira, the script is really where the film stumbles the most, other than maybe some of the performances by some of the cast members. It's one of those films where it's only half one genre. I label it as a horror film because at the end of the day, it is a horror film. It deals with a cult that is trying to resurrect a old Cthulhu like god to take over the world. So it is a horror film, but it doesn't start off that way, and it takes way too long to really show its roots as a horror movie. For one, I think it focuses too much on this awkward party at the beginning of the film. It does a good job capturing how awkward these kind of parties can be, where it features people that you don't know. There's a lot of things going on that you're not really privy to, or you don't really know a lot about. So it's a very awkward and uncomfortable experience, but it lingered on that way too much. There were some attempts to try to show that something was off, something was not right, but they were not very well written to me. They weren't as clear as I think they should have been. They were too vague. I think the film would have benefited a lot more by introducing this cult earlier in the film and showing them doing really weird and creepy stuff throughout the party, where the lead, our main character Norman, he sees what's going on, and he's understandably confused and a little bit scared, and then he's trying to get other people to understand what he's seeing, or trying to get other people to be aware of it, and they're thinking that he's nuts. Like, I think that would have worked well. It would have tied into the awkward nature of the first half of the film, and then it would have given you a little bit more to sink your teeth into when it comes to the more intriguing aspects of the film's plot, which all dealt with the horror elements of the story. And speaking of the horror elements, yeah, at times it's a little fractured, or the pieces don't always fit, but the horror elements in this are still, for the most part, fairly effective, because it's just really interesting to see how this whole cult angle unfolds. And there's some really cool and genuinely freaky stuff that the writers do with this. The climax, for instance, where they resurrect a dead body, a corpse comes to life, and then there is this mass of corpses, of dead people, that combines together because they are tied together as a part of the ritual. And then they are resurrected, and they're all walking as one, as if they're one entity or one person, and it's very unsettling and unnerving. And then I love how the screenplay and the story incorporates sound with everything, because there's a certain frequency that disorientates people and makes it easier for the cult to do what they're trying to do. And the story actually incorporates that sound into the plot in a way that works. It's really effective, and it's executed brilliantly when it comes to the sound design and the sound editing, because they actually do capture what it's like to have be disorientated. I mean, disorientated by such a piercing, unearthly sound. And the camera work also works really well too, because it'll tilt and it'll be off kilter, and you'll have different issues with the lighting in the room, so the lights will flicker, or the room will go dark. And I just really thought it was a really great use of different forms of senses to really disorientate the audience. I think there's a certain tragedy too that works, involving the deterioration of the relationship between Norman and his girlfriend, and the investigative aspects of the cult. There is a lot there to definitely keep you intrigued once they bring that into the story. But I think it could have done a lot better job incorporating the resistance, the folks that have infiltrated the party and the cult and are trying to stop the apocalypse. I think the script could have done a much better job incorporating those characters, and also writing those characters in a way where they're a little bit more likable, a little bit more personable. Speaking of characters, I think they could have written better. The screenwriters, I think Norman could have been written better, because he just comes across as a character who is a little too much of a simp for his girlfriend, and a little too oblivious when it comes to what's going on. I think they could have made him a little bit more smarter, a little bit more clever. Definitely given him a little bit more personality, because a lot of what he's doing is just kind of being this sad sack of a guy who's trying to cling on to this relationship that is nearing its end and is not really seeing the reality of things. And then he eventually snaps, and that's a good moment. But I think the stuff before that moment when he snaps and finally isn't going to take any more of this shit and actually stands up for himself and becomes somewhat of a heroic figure, I think that should have been balanced out with some stuff earlier on, which makes the character a little less pathetic. So it makes it a little more cathartic when he does stand up for himself, because it's one of those things where you were rooting for him the entire time, and then when he finally does, you're like, yes, finally. But I didn't really feel that way about Norman early on in the film. So when he does snap, it's well written, and I think there's a lot for the actor Corey Feldman to really work with. But I feel that uh, it would have been more effective if the character was closer to what you really saw Corey Feldman do a lot of the time, playing these kind of characters that they're a little bit pathetic at times, maybe a little lame, but there's something about them that still makes you enjoy being around them, or makes you root for them. The girlfriend, I also feel that character was just a total bitch for the most part, Allison, and that's another thing that could have been written better in terms of making you actually somewhat care or sympathize or feel for this relationship falling apart. I mentioned how it's tragic that the relationship crumbles, and in some ways it is. Definitely when it comes to what Norman has to do at the end of the film, but I don't think it's as tragic as it could be if these characters were just written better, where their connection, you saw moments where they actually were genuinely in love. So that would make the eventual breakup, or the eventual moment when Norman has to take an axe and kill her in order to save the world, so much more powerful. Speaking of that ending, I don't like how open ended it is. I don't like how it doesn't show his girlfriend getting killed by Norman. I don't like that. I think it should have shown you that series of money shots, or maybe decapitates her. Just a quick decapitation, fade to black, instead of he's got the axe and he's hesitating and he's hesitating, and then it fades to black and the movie's over, and you don't know really for sure whether or not he went through with it, whether or not he actually did kill her and saved everyone, or he chickened out and didn't do it, and now we're all fucked. So we don't really know what happened. So I don't like that. I don't like the ending. I think it is honestly way too open ended. But the script, like I said, it's interesting. I like the cult aspect, and I think there is a lot of potential here for a genuinely compelling and interesting film. But on the other hand, it's also one of those things where it doesn't fully live up to the potential. And the reason for that is there's really not enough there. Either it's not fleshed out enough, or the things are not written well enough overall. And if it's not fleshed out enough, then it really would have benefited from just being a short film, or being a part of a horror anthology series or movie, instead of being a feature length movie, because it just feels like there's not enough there to really make it work for a feature length film. And it's not even really that long either, but it just feels stretched out a little too much. That's why it kind of has this tale of two halves, where like the first half of the film is this awkward party and not much else. And that's when you have the whole cult element, and that's thrown in there. And the reason why that works so well and it's so much more effective and interesting is because it's more interesting. There's more to it. than the overextended party scenes, which were probably overextended in order to make the film fit a certain running time. Speaking of overextended, I think the film's lead, Corey Feldman, I think he was overextended in this. I don't think he was really, at least with the way that this character was written, I don't think he was the right person to pull this role off. That being said, there are some moments of really good acting by Corey Feldman. Some moments that really surprise you. And those are the moments when his character shows intensity, where his character is angry and he's frustrated and he's sick of all this shit and he stands up for himself. But the other moments when he's just being this sad, pathetic simp don't really work that well, and in large part it's because of Corey Feldman's decision to have this ridiculous accent. I don't know what the fuck he was thinking. I don't really know what was going on in his head. I guess he decided he really wanted to do a tribute to Peter Falk and his work in Columbo, because he sounds like he's doing a Peter Falk Columbo impression for the majority of the film. And then it doesn't help either, and it's another one of those things where he doesn't have a consistent accent, because this happens a lot when it comes to Corey Feldman. He's trying to branch out, trying to be more ambitious as an actor. He overextends himself and tries to do accents, and it's laughably bad, and it's always inconsistent because he can't keep the accent throughout the film. It's bad enough that the accent sucks, then you have an accent that doesn't really carry on throughout the running time, because there's moments where the accent just disappears. So it's hard to take his performance seriously as a result, because it doesn't seem like he takes the craft of acting seriously enough. But all of this being said, despite how inconsistent a lot of things are with this performance, it's easily hands down one of his better acting performances because of the moments where he does shine. So that's why I would recommend checking this out if you can find it, if you're a fan of Corey Feldman, just to see him try a little harder to be more serious or try to do something different and a little bit out of his comfort zone. I don't think he pulls it off, at least not all the way, but there are moments. So that's another frustrating thing about the film, though, because you're like, if somebody could just rein Corey in and have him not have the stupid accent, and then have him have a little bit of that personality and charisma that we know he can have in some of his earlier films, and then incorporate that character into this wild, surreal, nightmarish party, I think that really could have been an effective horror film, but that's not what happens here. Erica Pryor plays Allison. She's not the best either. She's nice to look at. I'm not going to say her performance is terrible, but it's just as uneven as Corey Feldman's, because there are moments where the line delivery is flat, or she just comes across like she's not really, let's just say, that passionate about what she's doing. So there's a lot of going through the motions kind of performances from her at times. It doesn't help either. I don't think she has any chemistry with Corey Feldman. And in some ways that might be due to the script, because it just shows them as this couple who never really truly loved one another at all. And it was just all in Corey's Feldman's head that Norman was just believing that she was in love with him, but it really wasn't the case. But then you see some lines of dialogue and stuff like that that kind of lead you to believe that they actually did have a genuine relationship at one point. Also, it makes no sense to have it be this big tragic moment at the end where Norman has to kill her in order to save us all, if they didn't really have a legitimate, strong relationship to begin with. You also have Jack Taylor, who plays Ron Fulton, who is Erica's father. I think that's who it is. I could be wrong. Dale Douma plays Vincent. Mikel Averino plays a bass player. Jim Arnold, who plays a character named Jonathan. Um, there's a particular actor in this who is a member of the Resistance. He's a character that first comes into the film and lets Corey Feldman's character know the truth and what's going on. This actor is really quite shitty. I thought his performance was terrible. I thought Corey Feldman, even as inconsistent as his performance was throughout the film, I felt that Corey Feldman did a 10 times better job than this guy, because every scene he was just over emoting and trying way too hard to the point where it was just silly, and it just really exposed this guy as someone that is not a good actor by any means. It's like one of those performances where he's trying to be really dramatic, but it's done in a way where it's too obvious that this guy is trying as hard as he possibly can to act. It's like the John Lovitz character in SNL, acting, it's that kind of thing where it's just too much, just way over the top, and it just shows that this guy is not really as talented as he thinks he is. Like, he's thinking in his head that this is his Oscar reel, and if anything, it's something that really should be submitted to the Razzies. And the film also features some other technical elements that I felt were, decent enough. I mean, like I said, the direction is good. It's got some really impressive art direction and production design. I thought the look of the hotel was really nicely done. It was very, very surreal and Art Deco, and just really stood out in a good way. And the film also featured music by Eugenio Mira, who I guess used a pseudonym of Chucky Namanera. The score, it's okay. I think the film's more effective when it doesn't really have a lot of music and it's just relying more upon mood and atmosphere. But it's decent enough. It's not anything that I'm going to say is detrimental to the film. It does use an instrumental version of, like, "It's my party and I could da 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 da," and which is an interesting choice, and it does kind of fit. I think it also uses that song, or a cover of that song, as well. It features cinematography by Unax Mendia. I think that's another impressive thing about this movie, another really nice note for this film. The cinematography is just as ambitious as the direction. Really does amplify the film when it comes to the scenes where it's trying to be creepy and eerie and just weird and surreal. And the film editing by Aljo Levis, I also felt was pretty solid. Another thing that really added to the surreal atmosphere of the movie. And want to give the art direction and the production team a lot of credit as well. Javier Alvarino, Daniel Izar de la Fuente, who did the art direction, and the production design team of Miguel Asenisi and Ivan Moss and Fabiola Ordio. And I butchered all of their last names probably, and I apologize in advance. But at the end of the day, The Birthday is one of those films that I don't feel it deserves to be as obscure and as hard to find as it ultimately is, because this never got a release in the United States on DVD or streaming, and it's on YouTube, but the picture quality is not the best. I would honestly love to see this in higher definition, because I think, at least when it comes to the film's visuals and when it comes to its mood and atmosphere, I think that will be enhanced significantly. because of the fact that you're able to see it in more high definition. I think some of the performances are still going to really show their warts, and some of the other problems with the film are definitely going to be present despite the higher definition picture quality. But I do feel the picture quality is going to benefit the film. And I do think there are people out there who I think will find this to be interesting. I think there are people out there that might even like it even more than I do because of the elements that I'm talking about. It does have this H.P. Lovecraft vibe to it at times. And when it really does nail the surreal, nightmarish stuff, it's quite effective. And it's just as effective as any other independent horror film. So that's why I feel that the movie definitely should get an attempt at new life in the future through some other streaming service or through some other video platform in terms of a Blu-ray or DVD release. Because there are a lot of films that Corey Feldman has done that are way fucking worse that you can readily find and are readily available. And it's a shame that one of his most interesting and one of his best acting performances is so obscure and so incredibly hard to find. And the version you can find, other than a DVD overseas that probably goes for a decent amount of money, is a YouTube upload that's not even in HD. So it's a film where it'll keep your interest for at least one watch because of the elements that are brought into the fold regarding the horror stuff with the cult and that whole angle. But it does take a little bit for that to come into the frame, and by that point the film's already kind of semi lost you. It gets you back at that point, but then by the end of it, it just doesn't fully grab you. It's not a satisfying film at the end of the day because it doesn't have that catharsis at the end. It doesn't have that moment where it really feels like everything tied together well or wrapped up in a satisfying fashion. I wouldn't say it was consistently boring, though, or consistently dull, despite moments in the first half where it dragged. Because there was always something where it would just make you scratch your head or make you wonder what's going on. Like, there was always this vibe and there was always something going on that just felt like it was off. And just something wasn't right about this party. And it kept your mind going enough so when it finally did reveal what the truth was, it was something that at least grabbed you somewhat. It didn't fully grab you by the throat and not let go, but it was like a light tug, and it was enough to let you know that it's there and that it should be taken somewhat seriously. At the end of the day, it's a little bit of a disappointment considering all of the things that I've talked about that really showcased a fair amount of potential. But even with it being below average, I mean, I will take that over a lot of other direct-to-video horror films or independent horror films, because at least this film tried to do something unique. It tried to be something different. It didn't always succeed, but at least it made that attempt, and that means a lot to me, and it's something that I definitely do take note of. But anyway, thank you for watching my review of The Birthday, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.